Started. Call the meeting to order. Kevin Harrison announced to me earlier that he would likely be late and very late to the meeting because of a conflict. So we're not to wait for him and probably don't expect him to be here. The first item on the agenda is approval of the February 2023 minutes. I have a correction with regard to the votes that were taken on page 7. At the end of the second paragraph and at the end of the fourth paragraph on that page, the motions, I believe, passed with a vote of 8-1 and not 7-1. But other than that, I have no other corrections. Are there any other additions or corrections to the minutes? Is there a motion to approve?
I move. Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on, I'd like to compliment the person or people that put these minutes together. Is that person in the room? Oh, do a fantastic job. This is a very nice, thoughtful process, and it takes a lot of time. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The public agenda, there's no one who's signed up on the public agenda today. If there's no one that wants to speak, we'll move on to the next item. Staff report.
Good afternoon. Hopefully my voice is going to hold out. I'm not sure if it will or not, but I'm going to try. So if I need to repeat something, just ask me. Look at the packet. We'll go through the graphs for the PSB stuff like normal to start out with. I can get to them. I'll try to go along as it goes into your packet. On the finalized complaints, February 1st to February 28th of 2023, we had 59 total finalized complaints, 39 of which were internal, 20 of which were external. On the external findings, there was 1 coaching and mentoring, 1 exonerated, 3 not sustained, 5 sustained, and 26 unfounded. On the internal findings, there were 31 coaching and mentoring. I think that's wrong on the number. No, it is right. 31, 1 exonerated, 1 not sustained, 3 stipulated, and 4 sustained. I'm sorry about my voice. Like it's going to keep going on me. Going to the next page on the allegation totals. The 3 top allegation totals are the general duty responsibilities with 30, insubordination 19, and the contact with citizens at 12. From the bottom half of it on the bureaus of officers, it's still broken down through the city. And when you go to the gender and race of the officers that were involved, this is final entries only, and you can see what your totals there are. The next page just continues the race and gender of department members on how the investigations were broken down by race and gender. For the year-to-date finalized complaints with the allegation types, the ones that typically lead and had led through last year are the same ones that are this year as well. And a lot of those, like we talked about, are the general category violations. of general duty responsibilities, the insubordination, which is the 3.1301B, which is comply with all policies and regulations, and then the contact with citizens, 3.302B. After that, you guys can go to your finalized summary sheet, and that's where you can, Jay, if you want to talk on that at all, if you want to ask them about ones we want to look at and stuff like that.
Sure. Before we get to that, I had a question about
Yes, sir.
you need a cough drop? I happen to have one.
I got some mints. It's come and gone all day, so I'm not sure what's going to happen with it.
I come prepared, so we can. Looking at the closed cases, finalized complaints on the graph, Patrols South sticks out like a sore thumb. Let's go with 24 as compared to 6 or 7 for the rest of them. Is that an artifact of someone just closing out a bunch of cases at once, or is there a reason for that anomaly?
So from just pulling the report itself, I can't give you an answer on what that is. I mean, I can go back and look at it and see what it was, but I would assume it meant that there was a bunch that were pending that all happened to be closed as they came through. There hasn't been anything that I'm aware of that added a bunch that were closed out all of a sudden, or any other instances that caused that. Typically, like with me with Patrol North, I had a higher amount for quite a while because I had some longer extended investigations that had happened. So they could have had a couple of those that involved multiple officers. I just, without just pulling just the report itself, I can't answer that, but that's something that if I can go back between now and then, between now and the next meeting to find out, but I'm not aware of anything that caused a spike in them. Typically, if they're going to be closed out, it's because they come in bunches like that.
And I was just curious, I mean, if it's just
I saw that too, and there's nothing that explains it to me from just where that comes in.
Right. My concern is if there was some sort of a event or whatever that caused that, that'd be relevant. If it's just a matter of
I do not know of
ordinary
any
flow,
specific thing that made that be such a larger number.
Right.
On that topic, does it make sense? Because I know for a while we had somebody from PSB attend all the meetings. And so, Captain Easter, you're kind of like the guy in the middle, right? You're trying, and you don't have all the answers. So does it make sense that we ask the department to start sending somebody from PSB again? Because they would know.
Does it make sense to me? I would love it, yes. But I mean, the honest answer is I can see if that's something that we can do. It would be up to the PSB commander and if the chief wants them to come here or not. There's not a reason I'm saying that you would say no way, but I can check into it. I agree. They might have a better background on some of that stuff. I know I don't have a lot of answers sometimes because I'm getting this without full context.
Sure.
But it's something I can look into to see, even just for staff reports, if we could have somebody that would have a better, or at least somebody I could get with more time before this to have some of those. But the problem is, I guess I present these not knowing what the questions might be as they come. So yeah, I can look at that.
Why did PSB stop coming?
I don't know if there was a specific end to it, other than when I started this, it kind of became my thing to do. And I didn't specifically ask for any of them to come. So there wasn't a defining event that I know of, or I wasn't told of one to have them stop coming here. We used to have different positions that would come here as well. And it's kind of, I guess, morphed into me coming and doing majority of the things. So.
Well, did they come at the beginning? It seemed like they didn't.
The history there, not at the very beginning, but then for a while, the PSB commander was here on a pretty regular basis. And we also had, for a while, the chief, That fell off pretty quickly, but then there was a decision that a deputy chief would attend, but that has also been intermittent at
It just
best.
seemed like when we began, there weren't a lot of people from the department here. Then we had a lot of people, and now we're back to not down so many people.
But the quality of our people is great.
Oh, yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Jay, back to the your initial question, it stuck out to me as well. And I have to wonder if there's anyone on executive staff that when they see this, that they're paying attention, because to me, this could be something like a lack of leadership. Maybe somebody along the chain isn't making these investigations a priority, and they're sitting on somebody's desk. I would be interested to know what causes this.
So part of what I just got an answer on was that they were short in lieutenant positions.
They were short what?
In lieutenant positions, and one that was taking all the things and combining them, was able to get a lot of them caught up and closed out at one time. So that's where some of the South stuff came in at.
Captain, are we still seeing repeated RMS entry errors that, given the large number of coaching and mentoring in the past month and the 24 from South, I'm just wondering whether there's still some administrative incidents being reported as opposed to performance-related?
So a majority of the ones that we saw from RMS are going to be in the records section. And some of them will pot officers, but not probably that number there. Like I said, and I'll follow up more on it. That's just a quick answer that I just got, was that they were short the lieutenant position. So nobody was there to complete those and finish them out. And then when they got caught up, they submitted a bunch in succession. So.
Well, and these graphs and the way that we're seeing these are made specifically for our meeting. That doesn't mean that the command staff is seeing it in the same way, so they may not be seeing the same things that we are. We don't know what
Executive
reports.
staff should be looking at stuff like this.
Right, but I don't know the format. They get a lot more information than we do.
Oh, true.
And so
Correct.
maybe they are seeing stuff that we're not, and so they don't have that question because they're immediately able to see the answer.
So,
Very
yeah, and they don't see, they don't see just this on a monthly basis. Like we poll these before, and Keeley creates these strictly for the board to see.
We asked for statistics. Unfortunately, statistics usually require an explanation at some point, or to me, they're meaningless if I don't know the background and what they're telling me. You can make statistics say anything you want and still be honest, I've discovered. So, we ask for statistics. And so if we see numbers we have concerns about, then we need to ask, and maybe at the next meeting have them explained.
Well, and Sharon, thank you for bringing up the next meeting, because what I find when I go back and look at the minutes, we say that we'll have, and this isn't necessarily on you, Captain Easter, this is even all around, but that we'll have a follow-up for the next meeting, and then those topics never get brought forward. So I don't know if we can have a structured way where, and Jay, help me out here. I don't know what the right way in a meeting like this is, but you can maybe tell the person taking minutes, let's set this or put this as an agenda item or a follow-up item so that we don't lose track of them, because that's been the history I've seen ever since I've been coming to these meetings. Great intentions to get to it next time, and if it doesn't make it onto an agenda, it just doesn't happen. It falls off, because I have 2 or 3 things, and I'm going to be interested to see if they come up, because last month we said that they would be addressed here again this month.
Well, I know that I've, over the years, in my profession, oftentimes what you did is when that came up in a meeting, then you put down who is tasked with that responsibility, and maybe that should even be in the minutes. If it's Captain Easter, then we say Captain Easter will, or some way or other that we can know who's supposed to be doing it and have it come up so that it's on the agenda or part of the report, however you would make those comments or make that knowledge so that we don't forget.
I think the easiest way to do it is Walt had noted that Zach is very thorough in these minutes, and if there's an item that we ask for follow-up on, we can just say that the minutes should reflect that follow-up should be done, and then we can look at the minutes
A list from there?
and decide whether or not to, we address it in the staff report if it's that kind of an item, or ultimately address it as a regular agenda item if it's more significant.
Mr. Chairman, will you give a minute?
Sure.
Captain, I really compliment you again for all the extra time you put in. I'm just curious, with your man hours and the other people hours involved in putting these charts together, how many hours of time, how much is it costing the taxpayers to put all this together?
I mean, depends on the meeting, I would say, right? Depends on what's going to be on the agenda for the next month. But honestly, I could spend probably a week's worth of my time, meaning a majority of days, doing work here that I fit in the time that I'm doing different stuff. Now, not all of it is just constant. I don't want to oversell it here, right? I want to be honest with you, but I mean,
Bureau North, aren't you?
I'm sorry?
You're in charge of Bureau North, correct?
Yes,
So you've got a whole lot of other responsibilities other than this.
I do.
Yeah.
So-
Any way to get this so we don't have so much?
Well, so I think that part of, and this will probably come up in the agenda item, talking about the Jensen Hughes report, right? Where it's been recognized, and I don't know how this looks yet, right? But it's been recognized that this board needs a dedicated staff person, not necessarily from Wichita Police Department. It doesn't really even specify necessarily from City of Wichita, meaning like where would they be hired, what would their role be, would it be some type of a contractor type person, would it be, but somebody to manage the things that you need to get done too from, well, honestly, like the minutes, so you have your own minutes, being able to run your own meetings, being able to have outreach, being able to set meetings in different places, all things that people from the police department or people from the city can help get done, but somebody that is designated to this board to make sure that it stays successful, right? That I don't want to go ahead of us too far, but my short answer is that they talk about these boards have trouble staying afloat and staying active when there's not funding to, and all of you give your time to this too as volunteers for this, right? I mean, you all have something outside of this that occupies your time as well. So I think moving forward, if we're going to make sure that it stays where it is, we get a full board, because we're still a few short, I believe. But that even adds more people, more things they want to see, more questions that they have. And I think having a dedicated staff person to work back and forth between all the city departments and the board is something that was a good point.
As long as that person has access to actual information and not having to beg and plead and will you please provide, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's how that has to be lined out from the beginning, right? When you talk about, is this a City of Wichita job? This is a contractor person. I don't know. I haven't, and my only input will be what your input is on what you would like to see, right?
Fundamental questions that maybe we can answer today or at least discuss as a board later. But I'm on this page, it's talking about the finalized complaints February 1st through 28th. It shows that 72% of the external complaints were unfounded. And you look at the definition, it says false, allegations false. But on the internal side, it doesn't even have that category. Doesn't have any that says, well, the allegation was false. But you had 31 that were coaching, mentoring, and so forth. So my question is, I'm wondering, is there some way to actually take a deep dive in the department and figure out how we can stop nickel and diming some of these officers? It seems like there's a lot of stuff that I'm seeing on these reports that I wonder why they were brought up to be investigated at all. Who initiates the complaint? Is that a sergeant, a lieutenant, is it the bureau captain? Why are so many of these looks like rats and cats kind of things that have very little to do with their performance on the street?
Yeah, I mean, well, so, part of why you're going to see that is because one, we have whatever that number of employees says, and there's whatever the number of sworn employees, right, who are working 40 hours a week. And with the way we have our PSB system set up, everything generates a number, right? And the board wants to see and know about every complaint and the numbers that coincide with it. So
But that's my
are you
question.
correct? You could be correct.
Why so many internal investigations to begin with? And on the external side, why are so many of them just unfounded and nothing on the internal side? You
So-
ever find that an internal complaint is unfounded?
Well, now it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. These are what the end result was. Okay, so it doesn't mean that those findings don't exist on the same way, but there were none that were unfounded in this months on the police side, right? So you're asking really multiple questions within a question, but and this is my opinion, but I think over time, from what I've seen, for being here as long as I have and been a supervisor as long as I have, the reason you see a lot of unfounded complaints when it comes to external complaints is that there are a lot of people that contact PSB or contact supervisors, stuff within the department, because they just want to be heard about what happened. They want a clarification on what happened. They initially are misunderstood as to why we did what we did because it's not always explained very well. And a lot of times they don't, even if they go to withdraw their complaint after finding out the information, it's still documented as a complaint. Okay, it's still documented because it came in that way, because that's what we should do to be transparent, right? So I deal with it very consistently, especially where I'm at. I supervise over 100 employees, right? And I pretty consistently talk to citizens and people like that they just want whatever it is to be heard. And once I explain it to them, or at least they know that I'm listening, a lot of times they're like, well, that makes sense. I understand that. I still have to document that there was a complaint made because we're going to give you the truthful numbers. So you will see more unfounded complaints that way. And you read strictly into the definition, I can see we're talking about untruthful. It doesn't mean we're saying everybody's lying, right? But we're saying that if they had a misunderstanding with an officer and they said, this officer handcuffed me for no reason, and then we explained to them, well, you were handcuffed because this, this, and this, it was still a complaint saying I was handcuffed for no reason. It means it didn't happen, that they weren't handcuffed for no reason. That did not happen. So it is unfounded, right? But that's why you're going to have external ones that are like that at a much higher rate. And they still can exist internally. And the reason that it kind of goes hand in hand, the reason you're going to see a lot of internal complaints is because that's what we should be doing. We should be making sure that employees are held accountable for what they do. Is some of it ticky-tack? Probably, yeah. But you'd probably be one of the first ones to go in line with me here and say that if we let everything just slide and slide and slide, eventually what happens? We get to worse and worse things,
I think in the
right?
Jensen Hughes report, they were talking about the culture of the department, and some of the line officers particularly are feeling, I think, nitpicked and asked, instead of doing coaching, mentoring, or additional training, make it a friendly situation where they can learn, they're always under fear. And if we can get that fear factor out of it, so that these guys can actually do their job on the patrol without feeling like somebody's got a rat on them.
I get that.
Something
but-
minor, it seems like we might have a better culture and more officers.
But out of how many complaints, there were 31 coaching and mentoring, which isn't discipline. So that's going right in line with what you just said, correct? If we close 31 of those out with coaching and mentoring, that means we're documenting it because we should document it, but it's just a conversation for a learning opportunity for that officer, okay? There might be something where they go to some additional training. There might be something that goes on with it. I don't have a good answer for you, Walt, on how you pick and choose when to hold officers accountable things because it's tough.
Over here, allegations is 30 of them were general duty responsibilities.
Right.
That seems like a pretty broad,
It is broad.
Yeah.
It's very broad, and that's why you get 30 of them.
so why would that?
Because we don't have a
complaint
specific.
As opposed to, can we just talk about this, rather than file a complaint against the officer, can we do it in another way without?
Well, it's just a documentation. That's all this is. Because there's a PSB number generated, it's just a documentation. So, and I think that if we told you, and I came to this board and said, we don't ever really document what we do, we just kind of take care of it, I would get a lot of backlash, correct? Because I think that people that want oversight want those things documented, correct? So they can see, because in 5 years from now, when that officer does something and somebody says, well, how come the department never documented all this stuff they did? We have, and that's why you're seeing this. And I'm not saying there couldn't be changes, 100%. Okay, do I enjoy doing all of those?
Hey,
Of
but
course I
I hope
don't.
that this conversation is something will spark
Yeah.
a conversation within the department so that you can realize Jensen Hughes found it, the officers reported in their survey, we're seeing it on these reports, and yet for the citizens, I'm familiar with the fact that we've had citizens file complaints. Not only are they not contacted, but the witnesses that saw what went down aren't contacted, and yet their complaint is unfounded. Only 4% of all the 265 complaints, or 245, there was a large number last year of complaints external, only 4% were actually sustained.
Okay.
But on the other side of the coin, the internal, you don't even list it. So there's a dichotomy and a double standard, I think, that might be looked at.
I'll tell you what, I understand what you're saying. I think I've tried to answer the best I can, but you're right, there's something we can look into. But I'm just, for the sake of things, we probably need to move on to
All right.
where we're at, because otherwise we won't be going through agenda items again.
Is there any, we have a list of new cases closed, finalized complaints February 1 to the 28th. Anybody want to call any of those cases for review?
Well, we're not limited to February 1 through February 28,
You've
right?
got 5 years.
Okay, right. So, well, yes, on this one, 22 PSB 3150. This is, part of our mission is about racial profiling within the police department. And I've noticed now in these descriptions, the racial profiling is almost never here. And I've been looking back at prior years, and it was in there quite a bit. And I don't know why the citizens would stop saying, I feel like I was racially profiled, but I think it would be helpful to us. And I would be, perhaps the board could have a conversation about maybe some of the graphs we don't need or something, but I think it would be really helpful if we could know the race of the complainant and the race of the officer, because there's nothing here that's going to help us identify those issues.
Captain, when you prepare the summaries, I know in the past, because when we've noticed it, we've called it for review. When you prepare the summaries, if the complaint alleges racial profiling, do you put it in the summary?
I do. And there was somewhere recently that we were having, not us necessarily, that there was a conversation about this, and there were not very many racial profiling complaints between last year and now, where people actually said racial profiling was alleged. But what I can do, same thing, and like you said, Twyla, I understand on the notes in the back for follow-up. And it'll be something we'll look at for, like you said, whether we just set an agenda item back for follow-up or like you and Jay spoke about. But I can look and see what the actual reported number was for last year.
Is that something that is still tracked, though? That's what you know what I'm saying? Is that whole idea, not because someone made the complaint, is that something that is tracked about many stops to this population and things of that nature? I'm just curious. I'm just curious to know.
Let me make sure I'm understanding. So like, meaning other than like the traffic data side stuff that we were talking about. I mean, that's really where you have that, right? Where you can talk and break it down by people receiving the citation. So that's where that would be tracked, right? And then when you talk about actual racial profiling, somebody alleges that, then yes, there would be because it will be put in there as that this person believes they were profiled. So
Was it ever tracked? I mean, was it ever tracked internally within the department and then it changed?
not that I know of.
Okay.
I don't know of any changes we had in that.
Any other cases, folks?
On this February 1 to February 28th, it's curious that beginning with 22 PSB 4120 and then the next two, the allegation is insubordination. And when I think of insubordination, I'm thinking internal. But these appear to be external, or are they internal? Like a complainant questioned a complainant alleged officers used unnecessary force and mistreated her and her children, but the allegation is insubordination.
So remember when we gave you the allegations and directives, right? And we talked about how these different allegation numbers are under directive headings, right? So 3.1301B, which would be comply with all city and Wichita Police Department regulations, policies. It's a long policy, meaning, or it's a long sentence, meaning you must comply with all policies and regulations. So if somebody chose that, meaning that it's alleged an officer might not comply with policy, that's why you're going to see that directive number, right? 3.1301B. It falls under the heading of insubordination along with 3 or 4 other directive numbers.
Okay, well, thank you for the reminder.
Kind of like how when you might see a contact with citizen here, but it's internal employees, it's because when that supervisor chose 3.202B, must be, what's it say, must be courteous and, to everyone. It's under the directive heading of contact with citizens, but it could be used internally, and that's the problem where you're trying to generate a report for outside. Because inside, we all understand what that means. We all understand internally that on 3.202B, it can be used for any person because it says you must be courteous and respectful to anyone, right? So we see that, it just makes it through our system, we know. Where it becomes clunky is when you pull a report like this and it's got a directive heading that doesn't make sense to you by looking at it because it says contact with citizen on this side, but there's no way for us to change on how that report pulls because that is the directive heading that allegation falls under. So you're going to see that here and there.
But this says unnecessary force.
Which one are you looking at?
22 PSB 4702. I mean, I hope things like this just don't get lumped under a rather benign allegation.
Well, I see what you're saying, and I would have to look at that one specifically, like look into it to know what the details of it were.
Well, let's go ahead and pull it then.
I had just a couple of questions on page 2 of this report. One, an officer was investigated for conduct unbecoming, where he or she was coached and mentored regarding report writing when it comes to sensitive cases. And then there's another one, 647, officer coached and mentored about errors made on a charging document. So can I safely assume that, because to me these are really important things, that the staff are receiving some kind of formal training, or maybe the DA's office, or if it's a municipal case?
Can I address that? I know about that. Those are issues that we see in municipal court primarily because of niche and how niche operates. So when we see those, we send those to the captain of records section. He then forwards it on to the bureaus, and then there is either education, counseling, minting. After so many indicators, they can be disciplined. But most of that is as a result of the new computer systems.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Didn't mean to steal your thunder, Travis.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I have a couple of other older cases, please. 21 PSB 5270. It was closed October of 2022. It's never appeared. It was opened October 5th of 2021, was not on the list of open cases, and it has never been listed on any of the other reports of open cases until it was closed. Let's see, and 20, so it's 20 PSB 4557. When it was initially listed back in April of 2020, it was listed conduct unbecoming, and then when it was closed, it was listed as use good judgment. So it's curious that an allegation would change from conduct unbecoming to use good judgment, same case.
So just remember, like, we need to just, one of these days, pull out the allegations and directives and probably just walk through the whole thing.
What's that?
It's the same heading.
Oh, okay.
Same heading, what do you mean?
So the use good judgment one is the specific heading. It's on this report that you were given.
Right.
So that's the specific heading, but the conduct unbecoming is that new title that they're using.
Okay, I'd still like to see it. Looks like an officer went into a closed Walmart and did some shopping. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Identify those cases, 20 PSB 4557 and 21 PSB 5270.
They were both 21, you said?
One's 20, one's 21.
Which was, I'm sorry.
20 PSB 4557, I think, right, all right, and the other one's 21 PSB 5270. Those are the numbers, correct?
Yes.
Thank you, Jay.
Any other cases?
Yes. We now have the Jensen Hughes report, and we have also policy from the city going back 5 years in the ordinance. And so I'm wondering how this board will handle the cases that were just adjudicated in the case of Justin Rapp. We have an officer that shot within, I understand, about 3 seconds, Andrew Finch. I think it would be important for us to be able to look at that in terms of the promotion policy that was implemented. How did that man get promoted to detective? And more importantly, how does this apply to the whole department when you had 2 previous incidents and this Justin Rapp case with Andrew Finch? Now, that amounted to $5 million in settlement, just I think last week, was it? Secondly, we have Cedric Lofton, a young man that was taken to Jayak. The officers have been trying to coerce him to get off the front porch of this foster family's home for hours. Finally put him in a wrap and took him there and said, well, he didn't have any problems, just take care of him. Now, them young boy's dead. He's gone. But my question is, how do we look at the mental health policies and how the officers of this department are going to handle calls for mental health, and then use of RAP, the use of going to the JIAC or someplace of that nature, or a mental health facility, and say, oh, he's got no problem, I'd falsify a document, basically. And so I don't know if those officers got any discipline, if they had any complaints brought against them, but that's pretty serious when a young man dies. And the third case I'd like to have us look at is Zacarias Randolph. Now, that case was finally settled in court. It wasn't settled. It was found by the jury that Officer Ryan Snyder was not guilty. He acted in self-defense, supposedly. Well, my concern is that we have that case brought in 2014. It wasn't decided until 2022. In the meantime, the mother had called for mental health services from ComCare. And Ryan showed up with another officer. Instead of backing away, de-escalating that situation, he ended up
What are
shooting.
you asking for? Because
Pardon?
I'm confused on are you asking to review policies? Or what are you asking to review?
I'm trying to look at how we look at cases like that have now gone through the legal process. And we're supposed to be able to take a look at some of the underlying policies and the training, and also how these officers were either disciplined or not. I don't know whether there's any repercussions or accountability for their behavior. So those are three cases where we had people die, and how is this board going to take a look at those serious incidents and not just say, well, we're going to nitpick this one or that one or something else? These are serious cases, sir.
Well, those cases are, I don't know whether the Randolph case is eligible for review or not. The Cedric Lofton case and the Rapp case are both eligible for review. In fact, the board previously made a motion to review the Rapp case 2 years ago, I think. I would comment that both the Cedric Lofton case and the Rapp case have gone through a very extensive review process, including the Lofton case had an independent task force that did a review much like our board would do. The Rapp case has gone through an extensive litigation process where all of the people involved have been deposed, and extensive reports have been written and been made available. And so in the context of that issue, I am not sure it is appropriate for the use of our time to make a separate case discipline review like we might do in the ordinary situation. It is entirely appropriate, if the board chooses to do so, for us to make a policy review that might be related to events of those cases. I mean, quite frankly, we are not going to be able to do any more extensive review of the Lofton case that hasn't already been done and produced and published. And the same goes for the Finch case. That record is extensive. But if the board feels that we need to be making a specific policy recommendation or a review of policy as it might be related to those cases, then that's appropriate, I think, for the
Thank you,
board.
sir. That would be my main concern, is promotion policy and how we handle mental health cases when the officers are called to a scene. I know they are put in a bind. It's a very difficult situation for them many times to know how to behave. But there are some things we can learn from those deaths, and I hope that this board will take some action to try to figure out what can we recommend.
Well, you have officers that are CIT trained. How many you have left on the force, I don't know, but you have officers that are CIT trained, and they can be called, it's my understanding, because I was on the CIT council, and they can be called to situations to help. Now, whether the officer chooses to call them or not, but they are CIT trained officers, and that is now, I believe, being integrated into the academy training. Not as extensive as was. They had 40 hours. We had officers off the street for a whole week with our training. So the CIT training is nationwide, and they have that. But, you know, the mental health problem is a problem nationwide. And within our city, it's more than just the police force, in my opinion, and in some of our elected officials, they agree. And so I think the mental health, for you to train the officers to really know what to do, you're not going to get there.
What I
I
would,
do think that we need to look at the more training and how much CIT training there is.
the board can decide, and I think it appropriate if we do decide that we could have an agenda item on promotion policies, and we can have an agenda item on mental illness items, and have a presentation and a discussion in depth on those issues. And if the board and they're appropriate issues, I'm not downplaying it, I think they're appropriate issues, but I think those need to be set as agenda items separately, so that the department can come, be prepared to address it, and we can spend an hour or more talking about it.
Sure. Well, we need to learn from these incidents. Unfortunately, people have died. I'm not trying to cast blame or doubt. I'm just saying we need to follow up. We just can't let them die in vain.
Yes, sir.
Captain Easter, can you get us the PSB number on the Joel Washington shooting from 2019, where the city settled for $200,000? The officer was Drake Kreifels. And then recently, again, it was in the news about a police officer affiliated with the 3 Percenters, and he just had a DUI. Does something like that generate a PSB number?
Yes.
That particular case has not gone through the grievance process yet, the 3%er case. So it's not right for this court to look at, or boards to look at.
We could get the PSB number so that we could
get the
track it with
PSB
this-
number,
Yeah, that'd
yes.
be great, because
Yeah.
otherwise, we're not going to know what it is when it shows up on our reports, right? It may just say, I don't know, something pretty benign, general duties.
It would say, the description would say had a DUI.
DUI, okay, good.
Right.
So that will be, so the one part the board has already reviewed that you were talking about. I think they reviewed it already a while back.
They're at grievance level.
Yeah, it's still, now it is, but they reviewed that. And then the part that would be a DUI part, once an internal is concluded and done, then we'll go on there and it will say, like, typical that officers committed a misdemeanor crime, and it'll be put that way.
Okay.
So,
If you just get us those PSB numbers, that'd be great. Because the point being then, if we pull it, then we can see the rest of his PSB history.
And we had that information, I think, in the context of the swatting case. Not the swatting case, the text.
Oh, okay. Texan case.
He was one of the subject matter.
Okay. It's hard to know which one, right? I mean,
Well,
we saw-
it was actually, you could tell because it was the one with the 3 Percenters.
Oh, okay.
It was identified
There you go.
specifically.
And now he has a DUI and he's still on the department?
Captain, just for clarification, and you just said something that caused me to, the last meeting, I think Odell Harris called for it, but it was 22 PSB 4215, which was the follow-on case on the texting. And we had, the board members may not know this, but we had listed it on our proposed agenda this time, but then it got pulled because you said it was still in grievance.
correct.
Is that officer still with the force? Because I thought maybe he had quit, and if he had, then is it not in grievance anymore?
No, still is.
Still is? Okay, all right.
So there's a difference between closed but then can still be grievance, or it's just,
If it's in grievance, it's not, PSB will sometimes show it as closed.
okay,
But the ordinance says we cannot look at a case until it's gone through that process.
Okay.
Because it's, I guess Sharon can weigh in, but it's technically not closed because it could be changed.
okay.
So if they grieve it, or
So when we pull the report, so we don't lose track, if it's closed through PSB, we try to put it on here so we don't lose track of that. But then if you choose it, then we just have to wait until it makes it through all those processes before we can actually put it on an agenda.
Okay. How do we keep track of those? Well, I meant like, because I remember a while back, Jay, and I think it was perhaps even a new complaint, but you wanted to keep track of it so that when it was closed, you would know, right?
Right.
And I don't know if it was a grievance case. I don't remember what it was.
Well, sometimes there's civil lawsuits included, criminal lawsuits are
I mean, your answer is Jay and I have a running list that we keep on the ones that are identified for this stuff.
Lofton is still very much pending in federal court from the civil side, and the memorandum of agreement with the FOP provides a grievance process, which would need to run its course before this board could look at those kind of cases.
right.
And yet, what we have from Jensen Hughes, their recommendation 6.5 on page 72 says that direct the WPD to provide detailed summary of the origin and the nature of the complaint within monthly spreadsheets of open and concluded complaints, investigations, or a copy of the completed complaint form precipitating the investigation.
Right.
So we're not seeing the complaint form is filled out by the complainant, and we're not seeing any that are open. We only have to wait till somehow it's completed. And it goes through a long, long process of adjudication. Some of these cases have gone not 10 years, but I'm aware of at least 5, 6 years is a normal pattern of string these cases out. So that goes beyond the 5 years in some cases. My point is that the recommendations from Justin Hughes now are saying what we've been saying all along. Please show us the complaint. Let the complainant come in and be a part of the process. Let them know that we're actually going to review their case beforehand. If we call a case up, make sure they know and they can come. And then make sure we also have a chance to look at things that are open, such as the one you're just talking about, Cedric Lofton. All right?
Well,
that case is something we got to deal with.
Yeah, no, the ordinance would have to change for what you're proposing, Walt. And the recommendations of Jensen Hughes, city staff, and maybe Travis can jump in. I mean, we are looking at those processes, but you need to let staff have enough time to do those processes, and some of those will require ordinance changes, and ultimately those are city council changes. The board can't adopt all those as recommendations without some ordinance changes.
And Walt, just to give you a quick answer so we can move on from that, is we stopped and we had conversations with the board. We stopped bringing open complaints and changed to the closed ones because those are the ones we can review. Those are what we can move on. And we were having 3 and 4 different pages with 100 different things on there, and everybody's like, well, how do we know what we can review and what we can't? So this is why I'm streamlining it down to what is closed, and these ones that are open and might go through years of litigation, we couldn't review them anyways. Just because you say, we know about this, they're still gonna not be able to be reviewed by the way ordinance is written, okay, until they're closed. So that's why we bring the closed complaints. And when you're talking about, and they say, or providing a complaint sheet, I could tell you that's about maybe 10% of complaints have a complaint sheet. Nobody that 90% of people that make complaints, it's by email or phone, talking with somebody. They don't come in and fill out a complaint sheet. It very rarely happens. So there's not much you're going to get out of that, out of 50 some of these, to see 5 of those, right?
But I know that the city's policy has been to just drag these cases out by one motion after another, and they'll often file for, summary judgment to see if the judge will just throw the whole thing out. Many times it comes right up to the trial date, and they'll find a judge that's sympathetic, and sure enough, the whole thing gets thrown out after 2 or 3 years of trying to get it before judge and jury. In the meantime, the officer's still on the beat. In the meantime, there's been no discipline or accountability. And what we're trying to do in our charge in this committee, this board, is to try to build up the trust between the officers and the community. And I'm not sure we can do that if these things are always baked into the cake, so to speak, that make it very difficult for these officers to actually stand accountable for their behavior. So how do we get around that problem?
Hasn't the policy, it used to be that there was no PSB investigation until it was all done, which is what Walt's talking about. Within the last 3-4 years, that policy changed, and I don't know whether that was with probably with Chief Ramsey. PSB goes ahead and does their investigation while the civil is doing their thing over here. Now, you still can't review that until the civil's done, but we're not waiting a decade to do that policy review by PSB. We used to, but we're not anymore.
While a criminal is active, yes,
Right.
it's still going to, so while a criminal is active, then there won't be a full internal done.
Well, let's see if,
Civil is going after a criminal, then yes, they go ahead and do it. So I'm not quite sure.
I mean, Walt has articulated his view many times, and I appreciate it. We have a focus. Our focus on case reviews is on closed cases that are ready for review. That is our mission as it relates to those cases. And so let's move on. If there's no additional cases to be identified, the next agenda item is the citizen request for PSB case reviews. I am not aware of any new citizen requests in the last 30 days. At the day of the last meeting, we did get a request for a citizen to review 22 PSB 5618. And so, and because our policy is always to review a case that a citizen has asked us to review, we need to set that one as an agenda item. I would suggest we try setting that one as agenda item for next month, and make sure that the letter goes out to the person so they know of the meeting. We have pending and I know, Captain, you have a list and I have a list, and we have pending a series of cases. Our subcommittee met on 3 separate cases, and I understand from Ricardo and Twyla, who are here, that you thought no additional work needed to be done on those cases. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. There are, of the listing of cases, and I'm just going to do it by fiat, more or less, there are a series of cases that need to be reviewed, some of which I think that the board needs to look at as a whole. There are 3 cases that I have identified for potential subcommittee review, and they are a bit more substantive than some of them that we've been reviewing. So one is 22 PSB 5200. One is 22 PSB 0770, and one is 22 PSB 5394. Those cases are 0770 is failure to comply with policy related to an investigation and failure to supervise. 22 PSB 5394 is one that Twyla asked for review. It is an allegation of a misdemeanor crime. And 22 5200 is an insubordination and use of force complaint where someone alleged the officers treated him unfairly and treated him as a threat when he wasn't. I would like to suggest that the subcommittee review those cases. Any other comments or suggestions?
How many does that leave then for the board with all that we've added today?
Well, I don't know. We've added 4 or 5 cases today. I had one, two,
You had 2 or 3 last month, I think.
I think 6 or 7 more before that. So that would be a bunch.
That'll take us almost to the end of the year at the rate we go.
Well, some of them we can knock out by the subcommittee process,
Yeah.
but that's a lot.
Subcommittee can do 3, right? You did 3
Right.
Last time?
Yeah.
Been trying to do 3.
That's three more that,
You don't have to limit us to 3, do they?
I am for now, please.
I
I don't mean to be rude, but
No.
I assume just-
having to set up for 2 meetings a month now. And like Jay said, these are more, the ones we had this last time, we know we made it through them and we got there. But if they're more involved, and now I'm going to be trying to do 5 cases on top of the other stuff, it's a lot right now. I do think we will get, as we get to this report, I think we're going to get somewhere with this. I'm just asking for a little bit of time to stay where we're at and keep working with it.
One other item, just as an announcement that's not really a staff report, but I want to get it announced again before we move off to other things and then forget about it. The racial profiling group has, as I mentioned last time, invited us or members of our group to attend their meeting on April 20th at 6:30. It's at McAdams Park, the Carl Brewer Rec Center there. They want to visit with some of us to learn about what we do and exchange ideas. And so I wanted to remind everybody of that. Are there any specific volunteers that want to attend that? I just for open meeting purposes, if there's going to be more than half of us, we need to handle it a little bit differently, but I don't think that'll be the case. So, volunteers?
I'll go.
All right.
Where is it at again?
McAdams Park Rec Center. I think I think they renamed it the Carl Brewer. They revived the building.
I know where it is.
Yeah, we've had a meeting there before. Actually, our board met there once in the older version of the building. Okay, Paul and Denny. Okay. All right. Well, that's very good.
Question.
Yeah. 6:30 p.m. Yes, Ricardo.
The question I have is about, will that, subcommittee, when are we meeting again?
I thought
I'm
you'd.
thinking about the date would be.
Yeah, well, I
similar
think
to-
we'll coordinate that with Captain Easter.
What date? I'm sorry, I missed that part. Would it be on the same day?
It's the
Yeah, actually, this is the same day as the
same day, that's why I paused.
Right. I didn't realize that, but yeah, that's right.
If we meet at 4, we're done by 6:30. Who needs dinner?
Watch out.
I mean, I would say we could still do 4 o'clock and make sure we're
Tell them we won't
ready
come to the
go.
profiling meeting without food.
Those go pretty smooth when there's just us to the roof. So I think we could still meet at 4. We'll make sure I'll get it really pared down so we can get through those and you guys will be able to go to what you.
All right. Well, that's. I appreciate the effort and the volunteers and all that. So,
Mr. Chairman, while we're on the subject of meetings, meeting time, one of the suggestions that came out of Jensen Hughes was to move these meetings to the evening and to take them away from City Hall and move them out into the community, such as the Atwater Center, the
right. Well,
Brewer.
I mean,
When do we discuss those?
well, hopefully we discuss them at some point, but I'd like to kind of keep on the agenda a little bit. We're going to have a preliminary discussion of the Jensen Hughes thing, but if we're done with the case review stuff, we need to, you wanted a citation update on the citations data, didn't you? That's the next agenda item.
It's an next agenda item, I understand, but we have now still the question of how to handle these screenings. If you're going to have 3 people do it, can we make sure that the complainant is there?
No,
Why not?
because this is a preliminary issue. If the idea of this process is to evaluate whether it makes sense for the full board to review. It is a preliminary screening process. In none of these instances has the complainant asked for the review. The purpose of this thing is to allow us as a board to be more efficient at accomplishing case reviews. If the complainant asks for us to review, then we will do it automatically and invite them to it. But if they have not made the request,
Think about a situation where the complainant doesn't even know we're reviewing the case unless we invite them. This subcommittee will not have but just one side of the story. They only hear from the police department, not from the complainant.
this is not intended, this is intended to sort through cases to see if there's a potential issue that needs to be reviewed by the entire board. If we simply elect to go through the entire process each time, we will have not saved any time, and we're not efficient anymore.
But I'm concerned that we're leaving the complainant out of it, and that's what Jensen Hughes has brought up several times in their report.
I don't think Jensen Hughes brought that up. I think Jensen Hughes says that the complainants should be told, and they are told, of their right to review. And if a case is going to be reviewed by the full board, the complainant is told of their review. It will become a very cumbersome process.
I understand that. At the
And
same time,
they can
it's
still
only
request
a farce.
Always. Yes.
Pardon?
A complainant can always request that the board review it, and we will.
But they don't even know you're reviewing it. How could they make a request?
They don't have to wait for us to review it. They can put a request in for us to review
Yeah,
it.
but
That's
they
in the
don't-
pamphlet.
That isn't any place where they can find it. First off. Second off, we've got some specific case numbers now, and those case numbers are specific to individual cases. Without letting them know that their case is up for review, they won't have a chance to say a word.
Well, I suspect in a number of these cases that the complainant was internal, but I don't have that data in front of me.
You have to invite them first. They have to know we're going to look at their case. How many cases? Well, 246, right, last year? Every one of those were external complaints. Those people don't know that this board is going to look at theirs unless we invite them.
Well, we are letting them know whenever we do as a board. The subcommittee is just kind of it's my understanding, is to save us time. Otherwise, as a full board, we'd have to sit and look at all these, and we don't have that kind of time here. Now, if we want to call special meetings of the whole board instead of just a subcommittee, and we look at these, then that's a different ballgame.
Well, we've been doing this for now 5.5 years. And what we discovered is that in the great majority of the cases, the facts, usually shown by a video, don't generate any controversy. There is nothing that needs to be specifically investigated. There's no policy recommendation that comes out of it. And so as we discovered that, we thought, well, one of the things we could do is sort through this collection of cases and have the board pay attention to cases that it made more sense to review as the entire board. Because in many instances, when we look at it, it's just readily apparent this is not a complaint. The officer acted appropriately. The video establishes it. And in many instances, of course, the person who would have been the complainant or the person who was arrested or whatever never appears and never made a complaint. And so what we need to recognize is that we are a board that advises the department, and we look at these cases in a summary fashion to see if the process is working. If we see a problem, then we are supposed to bring it to the attention of the chief and the city manager and now the council. But we're a summary review process. And what we've now done is taken the step to say that if any citizen who has a complaint wants their case reviewed, they can tell us, and we will do it. And that, I think, is a fair process. And we now have in place a process that if we are going to review as an entire board, we will contact, we meaning the department, because we don't have their names necessarily, we'll contact them. There's a letter format that's been developed that says your case is going to be reviewed at such and such time. You're entitled to come. Let us know if you want to come. And
That's sent out every month?
it's sent out to who, the notification is sent, we only have 2 cases this month, for example. So it only goes out to the person whose case is being reviewed.
Correct. So that is current policy. You're currently doing that now.
Right.
3 cases.
Well, I
you
have the
just
stuff to
mentioned.
do that, and here's,
Pardon?
Honestly, I'm just going to cut in here because here's the problem that we continuously run into, is that if I'm going to be sending notifications to these citizens that their case is going to be reviewed, then we've got to start making it through agenda items to be able to review them at the end of a meeting. Because I can tell you what I'm not going to do is continuously send citizens letters saying we're going to review your case on this date, and then they show up and sit here, and then we don't get to it. And we say, well, next month. So there's got to be give and take here. I've created, or actually Jay, but we worked on a letter, yes, and it will go out to any citizen that made a complaint, their complaint was closed, and this board is going to review it. I'm doing that. Hopefully, if we get somebody that is actually assigned to this board, they will be able to do
present
that.
tense. You are doing it now, or in the future you will?
So we have done it in the past. I don't know if it's been consistent every single time. I cannot tell you that.
Every citizen that has made the request since the board, since the ordinance was changed that allowed them to participate, to my knowledge, has been notified.
I sent emails to some, you did.
I have personally handled to the notifications when I am aware, when I have the information to do it. And so they've been notified. We've now formalized it in terms of a form letter. But I've had direct communication with folks that have contacted the board and said they want their case reviewed. And I've said, be here on such and such a date. We bat probably 50%, maybe 40%, maybe 30% attendance, but they are told. And that's been the process we've tried to follow since the amendment to the ordinance in 2021.
You meet and you decide that, well, there's nothing here, the officers did everything fine. You've got a case 5200 that says use of force. That would imply that some individual filed a complaint. Is that correct or not?
No.
Might be, might not be.
No, not at all.
Don't know, do we? My point is
You
that
do know if I have it in front of me to
if
see.
the subcommittee decides, no, we're not enough here to even bother with the full committee to look at it, the full board, that's a decision they will make and we'll follow it. In the meantime, the complainant never knew that the meeting was going to be held because you haven't invited them.
There was a complainant, Walt. You don't
Pardon?
know that.
Jay, can I make a motion that we move on to the next agenda item?
Yes?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, the next agenda item is a citation analysis update.
So when we talked about this, we're going to be doing a full report on the comparison like we talked about in April, right? The department's I'm going to have a full report. Richard's going to continue with what he did. What he's going to talk about quickly today, so we can move on, is just basically any things that people have asked for in the changes in what we're doing, the tweaks that we're making, and then you'll have a full report in April. But I want Richard to be able to just kind of speak on it quickly. We'll move on and we'll keep going on down the agenda. That way we'll get up to something later maybe.
Good afternoon, everybody. Apologize for not being here. I was terribly sick last month. So the first slide is going to be plans for April, which is just lays out hopefully what I have, well, not hopefully, but what I will have on the presentation. The first item is have past year versus prior year graphs for total citations by diversity group, and total citations by category by diversity group. So that'll be the just a simple line graph for the very first one, where it's just total citations for the first year of niche versus the second year of niche. Then the second one's going to be with diversity group included, so it's going to have those different categories. And then the last one's going to be by category, so that's going to be the things that are going to be in the second slide, like the license violation, things like that. I'll also have the updated RRI stats for the past year versus prior year for Black and Hispanic diversity groups. That's simply the RRI statistics that I did last presentation, except in that line graph format. That way you can kind of see how this year versus the last year of data. RRI rank order by highest RRI charges and not total amount of charges for each diversity group. This was a request by Walt, where rank order is based on the highest RRI instead of just the total amount of charges for that diversity group. So I'll have that included as well. On the next slide, I have updated categories. This is kind of brought up by the board, and if you guys want to retroactively change this, it's nothing, no effort on my part. I changed it from, instead of moving to non-moving violations, I changed it to probable cause and non-probable cause violations, and that more in lines with like how a individual would be pulled over. So we took away like the things like the tag violation and the defect violation from the non-moving violations, and we put them down into the probable cause violations. If we do that, that'll align more with why drivers are being pulled over, and it doesn't conflict with the state's definition of moving violation, which is a whole different thing that the Department of Transportation has. And then the last slide is definitions of the data set. It's essentially just saying that I'm not changing how I'm pulling the data. Nothing changed in that. It's still going to be any charging document, municipal charging document that includes at least one charge of Chapter 11, which is the traffic ordinances, but it includes parking ordinance at 11.52 or pedestrian charges at 11.44. The data set is citations written from 4/19/2021 and onward. So the next month will cover everything for the first year of niche, 4/19/2021 to 4/20 was the meeting that we were said.
Our meeting is the 27th.
Oh, okay, then I can get you a better data set then. It'll be complete year to year.
Right, that's why we did it that day.
Yeah, oh, smart. So really quickly, those are the three kind of touch points as Captain Easter described that for the update for next month.
Now, I remember that, well, I think I remember that we asked like number of citations by officer by racial category, right? I saw that then you have the number of citations maybe by racial category, but not, because I mean, we're going to look for certainly, the guy who's writing tickets for only white people.
Right. So I have that. I have the data. I can create a slide on that if you'd like to. There is, unfortunately, I have about 5,000 citations that I had to manually add that is a period of time where they were handwritten. So they were only entered into the court system and not the niche system. So I had to manually add them to the data set. So I don't have the officers on that, but I can get it for all of the data besides those 5,000 tickets. So.
Yeah, I guess so it's clear then that we're comparing apples to apples, right? Like these 5,000 are broke out and then we can look at this.
Yeah. Essentially there was, and I think I made a slide on this last presentation, there was 5,000, and I don't want to turn up, but there was 5,000 tickets that I had to manually add to the data set that were handwritten tickets that were essentially just kind of given to court near the start of niche, and they were ever actually entered into the niche data set. So I was never able to actually pull them. So I took those, added those to the list for the presentations that I'm making, and then, but one thing I don't have on that is the officer data. So that one I will be able to tie the officer data to like who they cited racially. So. But I can do it for the other tickets in the data set.
Richard, would it be possible to get like hotspot maps for where the citations were issued?
I can do that. Would you like hotspot map like 1 year versus the next year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Please.
So back to those 5,000, but you'll be able to peel those. I just don't want those 5,000 to distort something, right? I mean, can you like exclude them from some of
So distort in which capacity?
if we're doing comparative,
Specifically for like looking at how many of a certain diversity group an officer has cited.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to envision without
Yeah,
data, but that's.
It's kind of awkward because of that. It's not going to, essentially, it's not going to manipulate the data because we're essentially just going to, for that specific analysis, we're just going to disregard those 5,000. We're still going to have the citations that we have in the data set that are not those to represent the diversity groups that those officers have cited.
How many are there without the 5,000? How many citations?
Sorry.
Because that'll give me,
Yeah. Total, I'm not sure.
I I don't know, more than 20,000, more than 100,000?
I want to say it's more than 20,000,
Okay, so,
but I don't have any data numbers on me right now.
all right, that's right.
Yeah.
Why don't we previously talked about holding this for an agenda item in April, so unless somebody wants to move it to some other month, I would suggest that we have a substantive agenda item in April that would involve the presentation of the data, a discussion of the data by the Wichita Police Department as to what it means and how the department thinks it needs to evaluate and respond to that data, and a discussion by the board regarding those issues. That's how I see the issue being framed up for discussion in April. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Jay, are you requesting that someone at the command level analyze it and respond to?
Right, somebody, the chief or the deputy chief or somebody with,
I would agree.
somebody, a departmental response is what I was envisioning, that we've now looked at the data, we're sharing it with you, here's our thoughts, and then we engage in dialogue regarding it. That's the thought process.
I'm in agreement with that.
All right,
Yeah, me too.
all right.
Richard, do you have any examples of what you have prepared?
I do not, unfortunately.
You made a presentation in January. We were looking for something here in March. You had 2 months to work on it. Do you have any progress since we've met now several times?
Yeah, I have the data and I have the necessary markers essentially for the year-to-year comparison. That way I can look at them cleanly without having to mess with the data a lot. So I have that data. I have it backfooted for, not backfooted, but I have it pulled up until, excuse me, end of March, not end of March, end of February. So I have that data. It's just none of it's in any kind of graph or chart or any kind of format like that.
Well, without being able to see what you're actually able to produce, it's kind of hard to know whether that April report will be complete. I wanted to bring to the board's attention, this is the motion that was passed unanimously by this board on the 25th of February of 2021, 2 years ago. And it asked for the quarterly reports to be done and presented to this board by April of 2021. Now, we're just getting to that point now, and I'm wondering how it is we're supposed to be able to move forward with a whole lot of confidence unless we can see some examples.
So, I'm going to stop you again. I'm sorry, but what we're
Taken 2 years to get to this point.
What we're going to do is just what Jay spoke about, which is we're going to present the data. The data is going to be what Richard brings, okay? We're going to have a response, a departmental response, okay? Between now and then, I'm going to speak with the chief. We've already, there's already been interviews with the news media. There's been things that have gone on where we're starting to put out our response. We're talking about programs. We're talking about things we're going to do in relation to the traffic data. It's all going to be one presentation that we're going to do. The data will be included in it, okay? But we could argue over and over and over about different ways that the data can be presented. It will be presented the best way that we want to present it as a department to you. And when we start on these reports after.
Specific, Captain. It was specific. It had the tables for them specifically. I worked with Lieutenant, is it Lieutenant or Captain now? Brian Safford. So we've had opportunities to discuss since January. And without seeing anything today, it's very difficult to know if we've made much progress. This motion was very specific to the types of data we would see. What you presented in January was not anywhere close.
To what you wanted personally.
No, yeah,
Well,
in terms of what the
That's
motion
what we're
was
coming down
passed
to.
by the board.
It's not what you want personally, but we will present something that the board can look at.
Let's move on.
But we can't keep having the same argument about this.
Let's move on. The next item is the Jensen Hughes report discussion. What is the sense of the board once again, we are running short of time. That report deserves some discussion. I had it down for a preliminary discussion just because we've only just recently gotten it. Would the board prefer to go to executive session, or would the board prefer, and defer that item, or would the board prefer to discuss that item?
Could we do executive session and see how long that takes, and then maybe come back to this if we have time?
We could, but we won't have time.
Could we,
Oh,
could we ask the public who are here what they would rather us do, why they came to the meeting? Is
Any-
that an appropriate?
I'm here for all of it.
Okay.
Because especially if we've got people here for the executive session.
We don't have anybody here for the executive session.
Okay.
Yeah, no, we don't. And to Captain's point earlier about sending out letters and all that, the few times we've had a citizen come, we've made sure to jump to that case in order to get that accomplished. That's been at least my intent, to get that done if the citizen has been here. So, thoughts?
Jay, we have things that I think we could really focus on this, and it's almost like it needs to be an agenda item, but with real time carved out, with meaningful conversation. You know,
No, I agree.
yeah, and so I don't know what a preliminary conversation now will help with, but it feels like, you know, this needs a lot of time. The data coming up, the citation data needs a lot of time. I would like for us maybe to commit some time to really studying the data that we're getting, you know, on the statistics and so forth, and maybe some of it we don't need and there's something else we want to have. But meaningful conversations, it just feels like there's so much for us to do, and 2 hours a month just isn't cutting it. I see nodding, so I'm open.
Maybe we need to have a special meeting. You could call it a retreat, you could call it a brainstorming, you could call it a special meeting. You can call it whatever you want to call it, but where we focus in on this report, on statistics, on whatever you want, and all this other stuff is peripheral. You know, I mean, we spend time on the report, and I appreciate that, but some of it I can read. I mean, I really can read, and if I have a question, I'll ask you.
All right, how about this?
So,
How about we set a special meeting with the agenda to discuss the Citizens Review Board procedures and the Jensen Hughes report?
Because that shouldn't require any time from you to prepare any statistics for us or anything like that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, no, I'm serious. That's something like you said, I mean, you said that about roughly 20% of what you do is for our meetings.
Right.
And so for us to call it extra meeting, I can see how that would.
I can't see where there'd be anything actually, if I'm understanding what we want to do, that you would have to do extra.
I 100%.
Do you need a motion for the extra meeting?
We should have a motion, and we should pick a date.
Jay Kelly has a point.
I have a question.
Sure.
What were the 2 items you wanted on?
What's that?
What were the 2 items you wanted on that?
The item would be to discuss CRB procedures and to discuss the Jensen Hughes report and recommendations.
Pertaining just to the CRB section, or would you like the full report?
I think our first meeting should be specifically to our Citizens Review Board, so we can,
Right.
Okay.
I mean,
So,
I can't guarantee that I'll have read the entire report, but I have read our section multiple times, and that's what I would like to discuss before we get into the.
all right.
Well, I've read half of it. I'm ready to
So-
read the other half.
April 6th,
What's the date on that? Is that a,
that's Thursday. Well,
Thursday.
Paula's out of town. April
My son-in-law is graduating from college, I'll be out of town.
what's the next Thursday?
13th?
That would work for me.
I'm out of town for a conference.
Well, does it have to be on a Thursday?
No.
Oh, I mean, I'm just throwing that out.
April 5th.
April 5th is the day that I'm flying out of Wichita.
All right.
Well, and that's, you're coming up on, never mind. Isn't that a Wednesday?
April 5th was a Wednesday, but
Yeah, I have church.
April 4th?
But, I could do the 12th, I could do that Wednesday, if I do the 4 to 6 time.
April 12th?
I can do the 12th because you're in, aren't you in Holy Week by then?
Yes.
Yes, so yeah, I could do the 12th.
No, I'm sorry, Holy Week is the week before.
Oh, okay, but I could do the 12th.
April 12th?
I'm available the 12th up until 7 p.m.
All right, why don't we somebody make a motion?
I move that we schedule a special meeting for 2 agenda items that you mentioned, Jay, for April 12th at 4 o'clock.
Okay. Keely, do you think this room is available?
I will do my absolute best.
Okay.
Since we're somewhat on the topic of Jensen Hughes and somewhat on the topic of resources, unlimited resources, does it make sense that we start making a list of if we had more time available or more resources, WPD could provide more resources, things that we would do? Maybe we could have more cases at the subcommittee, because we don't want to stress you out, Captain. It seems like from time to time, yeah, we'd like to do that, but it's too much work for Keely.
I was going to say, I don't know where you're getting these extra people from.
Yeah, exactly. Well, no. But I mean, we can't make a case. Like Jensen Hughes said, maybe we should have a staffer, but we can't make a case without kind of what those items would be.
Well, I would also maybe recommend as well, making sure that we all stay on track, is maybe someone takes on that extra responsibility of keeping a list of everything that's going on, not just for PSB cases, but other things you guys want to discuss that's not just being held by us, but that way you guys are comparing what we also have.
Twyla, you make a good suggestion, and you have an interest in it. Why don't you keep that tick list?
I'm not very organized, but I will give it my best shot.
I thought that was your job. All right, well, we can talk about that issue too as part of our CRB procedure issue. I think that it makes sense to have a discussion on all of those kinds of issues. And
Who seconded the motion for this special meeting? I'm sorry.
Twyla. I second.
All in favor, say aye, by the way.
Aye.
All right, pass. We got that done, okay. We're running out of time, but I move that the Citizens Review Board recess into executive session for 25 minutes to receive information regarding reports of Wichita Police Department pursuant to KSA 754319B1 to discuss personnel matters of non-elected personnel. The executive session is required to protect the privacy and interests of identifiable individuals. The executive session will begin now and will end at approximately 6 p.m. and the meeting will resume in our same first floor conference room. All in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll go to executive session and we'll